Okay, so today is day 61. Wow. So if you haven't checked out day 60, which was a recap of day 31 all the way to 60, please check that out because I think it's a good summary, as well as day 30 where we did a recap of day 1 to day 29. Because I appreciate maybe you might not have time to watch every one, especially binge wise. It'll be better for you to just follow on with us every day. That way you don't have to catch up on so much. But anyway, it's entirely up to you. Day 60 is over there, so you can check that out. So we continue today. We're now full steam ahead. 9 days to the New Testament. I'm so excited. It's going to be great. So today we're reading Lamentations chapter 2 to 5. Then we finish that and we get into another prophet called Ezekiel, from chapter 1 to chapter 12. So Lamentations chapter 2, crying over the destruction of Jerusalem as a consequence of their actions. We hear about false prophets and how the situation there was dire. Lamentations chapter 3, the prophet Jeremiah talks about his personal suffering and affliction, but he had hope. He had hope in God, hope that things were going to go well. And this is where we get that famous verse: the steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. We are able to compassion of God, the sovereignty of God. I think that's important in the book of Lamentations. The sovereignty of God is mentioned there. God sees and knows all, and he continues to cry for the city and a prayer, for deliverance. Lamentations chapter 4, punishment and judgment on the Israelites, as well as the coming restoration. Lamentations 5, the last chapter of Lamentations, another prayer for restoration. Then we get into Ezekiel. So now, as I said, we are now in the books of the prophets, and that's all we're going to be doing until we get to the New Testament, where God was sending these messengers with messages to the Israelites wherever they were, to turn their focus back to God and get rid of their idol worship and worship God, in spirit and in truth, just the way that they were supposed to. So Ezekiel 1, Ezekiel, we hear that he was a priest and he was shown stuff in Babylon whilst the Israelites were going into exile, or just around that kind of time. And we hear the first thing that Ezekiel sees is a vision of the glory of God. So he's seeing this and he's trying to explain it in Ezekiel chapter 1. Ezekiel chapter 2, a word from a voice sending him to Israel to prophesy. So he's actually sent. As you can see, this sending, that he was sent with the message to the Israelites, and he was told that whether or not they listened, this is important, whether or not they listened, he was supposed to go to them and tell them, and he was encouraged not to be afraid, because the stuff that they were going to be saying was not going to be popular. Ezekiel chapter 3, we hear about the hardness of heart of the Israelites even whilst they were in exile. Ezekiel is called a watchman, that he should say everything that he was told. Otherwise, if he didn't say it, the blood would be on his hands. We hear that Ezekiel's life, or we get to see that his life would be more of a physical sign. Isaiah and Jeremiah were more of visions and dreams and whatever else. But Ezekiel was almost like going a step further, that his own life would be used as a sign, and it would be very very visual. There's things like he would be tied up, he would be unable to speak, certain other things would happen within his family so as to convey a certain message, to the Israelites. We hear that the Spirit would enter him and give him strength, because every time the Spirit would come, or the glory he would see, he would always fall down without any power, but the Spirit was helping him through it. Chapter 4 starts now. You guys start to see these signs. A sign of the besieging of Israel and how it would be besieged and captured and taken over. A sign for the punishment of Judah and of Israel. Ezekiel as a physical sign of the lack and austerity in Jerusalem and how people would be starving. Chapter 5, judgment of Jerusalem for wickedness, by pestilence or famine, the sword, aka death, and being scattered or exiled amongst the nations. Chapter 6, prophecy of destructions of mountains where idol worship happened. The coming of judgment would be a testament to God's integrity, because he said, hey, if you don't do this, judgment is going to come. So it was just a way of showing that God does what he says. We hear about the destruction again of the places of worship, people, the famine and exile. And there is one statement that keeps being repeated in the book of Ezekiel that says, then they shall know I am the Lord. Ezekiel chapter 7, judgment of Israel for idol worship. Chapter 8, Ezekiel is taken in a vision and shown the idolatry of the elders, of Israel. We hear that this was the jealousy of God that was showing, Ezekiel this. We hear about the women and the men and all the people that were worshiping all sorts of different gods. So there was multiple idols, in the city or in the nation. But we also hear about the coming judgment. So the prophets are really simple, I think, in my opinion, to understand, because we hear that because of sin, judgment is coming. After the judgment, restoration will come. I would probably just boil it down to those three, points, of course, as well as the prophecy of things that were to come. Ezekiel chapter 9, these are visions that Ezekiel is just saying, where executioners of the city were called. First, they were to go out into the city or into the nation and put a mark on the righteous in the land. So the righteous people were, although all these things were happening, they still stayed faithful to God. And they would sigh and groan over the abominations that were happening in the city. Then after that, the executioners go and execute all the people who had no mark. And Ezekiel is just crying to now because he's being shown the things that were to come. Chapter 10, we hear about a vision of the living creatures, or the cherubs, or the angels that he had seen in chapter 1, and they were scattering fire over the city. Chapter 11, prophecy against men that were giving wicked counsel in the city, judgment upon the city, and the death of a guy called Pelatiah. We also hear and see that the future restoration was almost the only hope or the only comfort for these prophets as they were seeing these things happen. And we also get to see some detail in there about the new covenant. Ezekiel then comes back to reality, and he then tells the exiles what he had seen in his vision. Chapter 12, our last chapter for today, the sign of going into exile in Babylon, the remnant who would escape to tell the tale. And as we'll see as well, that you got to see this theater and the visual elements and the demonstrative signs that Ezekiel was doing, to show the Israelites, what was to come. We also see under the sign of eating bread in trembling, that this is what the Israelites would be doing. The pending fulfillment of God's words would be immediate, because the attitude at this point was, anytime a prophet comes, he's talking about things that are coming much, much later on. But in this time, God is saying, no, the stuff that I'm talking about now through Ezekiel are things that are going to happen, immediately. So yeah, hopefully that's helpful. Tomorrow we continue in the book of Ezekiel as we chart through all the prophets, before we get to the New Testament. I will see you guys tomorrow.